You'd be forgiven for being slightly sick of televised debates, but as the general election heads into the final stretch, the US presidential election is just getting started.
My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker, you're the loser.
Without question, the worst president, the worst presidency in the history of our country.
Last night, Joe Biden took on Donald Trump in the CNN debate in Atlanta, Georgia. Biden behind in the polls, Trump still reeling from being convicted on 34 counts of falsifying business records. Yet it was the Republican who looked dynamic, whilst the current occupant of the Oval Office frankly looked his age.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
Not that the evening was entirely one-sided.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. You have the morals of an alley cat.
Give you a minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star.
And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of these, Putin, they don't respect him, they don't fear him, they have nothing going with this gentleman, and he's going to drive us into World War III.
Yet, in the end, even senior Democrats acknowledged it had been a poor night for Joe Biden. I'm Niall Paterson, and in this edition of The Daily, with the presidential election not even happening till November, we are asking, is this the beginning of the end for the Democrats' hold on the White House? Joining us from Atlanta, Georgia, our US correspondent James Matthews, who of course was following every bit of that debate. James, your assessment of the night?
It was Donald Trump's night, Neil. I think if you look at it as a piece of political theatre, which after all, TV debates largely are, Donald Trump, he came out with untruths. New York Times counted more than 20. But if you look at the two of them side by side, I think you're looking at Trump demonstrating a political virility, square-jawed as much as he could manage. And on the right-hand side of screen, you looked at Joe Biden at his worst, looking every one of his 81 years. He sounded throaty, said he had a cold afterwards, but he had that stiffness about him, looked away from camera, sounded uncertain, lost the thread on more than one occasion. And Democrats were watching it from behind their fingers, putting their name to their concerns, and others who are anonymously talking about a crisis within the ranks, talking about what do we do with this guy? This is not a man who can win us an election. Biden needed energy and stamina to get him through the night, to demonstrate that he has what it takes to continue in high office. He did not deliver, not by a long way.
And we should not forget, and this is a really important point, that as you say, this debate taking place so early in the election cycle came at the Democrats' request. They wanted this.
When Joe Biden took the stage tonight, forgive me for being cruel, Mr. President, but it looked like The Walking Dead. That stiffness, no vitality, none of the energy that he needed, and that kind of definitive performance to convince the doubters, to convince people in the middle who are undecided. And, in that building, the way these things are structured, you get surrogates, you get people from both parties fielded to the media to talk about the performance, say how well their guy had done. I spoke to Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who many see as the heir apparent, the man who would replace Biden. Youthful, good-looking, got the energy, media figure, well-established. Beforehand and after, he was saying, no, look, I'm loyal. Biden did well. I thought he won it, saying all the right things. Many in the room, certainly amongst the Democrats, would have been screaming as they looked and listened to Gavin Newsom, the contender, taking a step back and saying, look, no, Biden's your man, get on with it. Discussions about where they go next, but very difficult discussions given that Biden is the nominee.
And look, we know how Donald Trump has approached these debates in the past. Lots of bombast, talking over the other candidate, so on and so forth. But the rules of this debate set it up so, there was a mute button. And even with that mute button, Joe Biden appeared largely on the back foot.
I've been to Trump rallies. I've stood there and listened to Donald Trump saying, my doctor says that I would live to 200 if I didn't eat fast food. And I thought to myself, well, that's great. You say that in front of a crowd. They cheer you to the rafters. In the silence and under the forensic scrutiny of the moderators and your opponent in chief, you're asked to explain yourself. You have to make well-rounded, full arguments about the points you're making, about the hard politics that you're presenting to the American people. So all sorts of questions about what the silence and the environment would do for Donald Trump. I think, frankly, he played it the best on the night.
Was there any true level of engagement when it actually came to policies that would be enacted by either man when they become president? Immigration, abortion, the economy. Those, to me, are three issues at the heart of this election. Did we hear any discussion of them?
In terms of the sums, the calculations, the reasoning that Americans need to vote for their next president, that kind of detail was in short supply tonight. I mean, it got childish, frankly. I mean, this is a 90-minute debate between two presidential candidates that descended into bickering over golf handicaps, teasing each other about who had the best golf swing. It was actually unbelievable at times.
Yeah, that was a bit of a moment, wasn't it? So let's have a listen.
I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior.
Just take a look at what he says he is and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf with you if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie. He's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8. But I have, how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Let's
not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to
Let's not act like children.
You used the word unbelievable there, James. I mean, a lot of what came out of the mouths of one candidate, Donald Trump, was false, was demonstrably false. I mean, Donald Trump just gets away with it time and time and time again. But even when Joe Biden was trying to challenge him on the detail, I would say, I think that was when Joe Biden looked at his weakest, when he was speaking from the head and not from the heart.
For Joe Biden, that is the concern, isn't it? Grasp of detail, being able to retain the detail and to articulate it publicly. So for Joe Biden, that clearly is an issue going forward. How do you have the man leading your campaign who, if he's not short on the detail, has difficulty in using it to his and to his party's advantage? But in terms of Donald Trump, he knows the winning formula, certainly in terms of his MAGA base. And in terms of how you pin that down, many have tried in different environments. The framework tonight should have worked to pin down Donald Trump, but ultimately, he wasn't. He told more than 20 untruths in the course of the 90 minutes.
Did Joe Biden land any punches on Donald Trump? I'm no Democratic strategist, but if I were planning for this debate, there are a couple of things I would have gone for directly, including, Donald Trump's moral compass or lack thereof.
He certainly tried to press that home, talking about how there was only one convicted felon on stage, said that Donald Trump had the morals of an alley cat, referring, of course, to his affair, which Donald Trump denies, with Stormy Daniels, the porn star. His answer on the night, Donald Trump, was that I didn't sleep with a porn star. So that's the kind of territory that we got into at one stage. And, that's where Joe Biden wanted to score. That was the viral moment that he was after. The word whiner was used more than once by Biden, and that was clearly a strategy on his part. Many people will watch 10 seconds of what happened tonight. Biden clearly wanted that to be about Trump being a convicted felon, about him being a whiner. I suspect that the viral video, which will extend into the rest of the presidential campaign, will be frankly, Biden losing the thread and screwing it up. And that has to concern the Democrats.
Joe Biden had a number of tasks to do this evening. Hammer home the point about January 6th riots on Capitol Hill. Hammer the point about abortion. But over and above it all, he had to appear strong. Americans like a strong leader. And if they were judging last night's debate on the relative strength of Trump, of Biden, again, it just seems clear to me that there really was only one winner.
Yet strength is key. I mean, apart from anything else, the strength to hold high office. Joe Biden needed to exude a mental, physical durability throughout the 90 minutes of TV debate. He simply didn't do that. Americans like a strong individual in the Oval Office. It's a strong nation. They feel that. They look at a TV debate, two contenders, and they want to see strength in the participants. They're asking themselves, can I see that individual running my country? Can I see my interests represented by that individual? That's the question in their mind. Strength underpins that. And what they got from Joe Biden was relative weakness.
James, more from you just a little later, but given this was all about shifting the polls in Biden's favour, we should perhaps bring in a pollster at this point. Friend of the podcast, Scarlett Maguire from JL Partners is back on the Daily. So, did the Democrats get their wish?
No, I think they've probably made things a lot worse. So usually television debates don't have very much impact on a race. We see that in the UK, but we can also see that in the US. I suspect that the Democrats would have wanted this to be an opportunity a bit like Ronald Reagan had in 1984 when there were concerns about his age and he knocked it out of the park and really then set the narrative for that election. They wanted this, Democrats. Joe Biden and his team wanted it. They wanted to go early enough to change what had been a very sluggish sort of position in the polls, especially with his own ratings. And, they've been in this position for the first 6 months of the year where now, unlike the UK, we're talking incredibly fine margins here. But where Trump seemed to have the upper hand, especially looking at those crucial swing states, Trump in the lead, sometimes within the margin of error, sometimes outside of it. But they were looking to turn the tide on that and put to bed these questions over his age, which have been, haunting his sort of whole cycle. And I think last night would have done the opposite of that.
To what extent do we understand why that might be? Are people just looking at Joe Biden and, frankly, trusting the evidence of their eyes that this is an old man, 81 years of age, clearly still sharp, but sharp for an 81-year-old?
I think, first of all, the number just sounds too old to people. And then increasingly you see these clips, you see him out and about, not looking like he is terribly sharp, actually. And it's those things that are feeding through. And they're now at a point where, a majority of the public, but including 7 in 10 Democrats, think Biden is too old to be effective for the rest of his presidency.
And what of Donald Trump's performance? Look, it's often said that this is a man who understands the medium of television, but the rules had slightly changed. There was a mute button there. There wasn't quite the Donald Trump of old talking over the other candidate, whoever that might be, all through the debate. How did he perform and how was he received?
All eyes are going to be on Biden's faltering rather than Trump's performance. In fact, Trump would often say that even. When Biden said something, he'd say, I don't know what he said and I don't think he does either, putting it straight back on Biden rather than active cases that Trump was making. To put this into a bit of perspective, there was a Snap CNN poll straight away that showed Trump winning the debate by a 2-1 margin with people viewing. And actually, we have just polled independent, self-declared independents who watched the debate last night in a Snap poll too. We also found that with this absolutely crucial group of voters, it was 2-1 and it was impacting how they would vote. In fact, we saw some people that said they were going to vote Biden for this debate, then say they were going to come out and vote Trump.
Wow. But in terms of policy, was there any area in which people were listening to Joe Biden more than Donald Trump? Immigration, abortion, these are key issues for the campaign. But given the way in which these TV debates are prosecuted, sometimes policy is the victim. And it's more about the personality.
But I think policy is important too. And I think that's actually fed into why Biden has been struggling this election. So they wanted to make 2024 a choice on Trump's character. And they wanted to set it up as the democracy of the United States being at stake, especially in the wake of January the 6th, which now feels like quite a while ago. Trump was succeeding, or Trump's campaign has been sort of potentially outperforming initial expectations so far, because at the moment, that's not where voters see it. Voters are prioritising the issue of the economy, and also the border immigration is becoming particularly important, and then again, Biden's own weaknesses. So last night, we saw, again, according to our poll, a kind of traditional fallout of these things. So we found that Trump, the independents that watched this thought Trump won on the border, the economy and foreign affairs, and Biden won on abortion, democracy and healthcare. That's a pretty standard fallout and reflects the leads those two candidates generally have on these issues, and that was how viewers felt about them in this debate.
Is it possible that just hammering those key areas, healthcare, abortion, having a moral compass in a way that perhaps Donald Trump does not, I just struggle to see that and that alone is going to see the gap between the two narrow and see Biden overtake Trump.
It's not like the UK. Yes, we have two unpopular candidates, or a choice of candidates that a lot of people are not necessarily very enthusiastic about. In fact, there's a lot more sort of animosity towards the two candidates in the US, rather I'd say in the UK it's a bit more like apathy. But the margins are so small that it wouldn't take much to move the scale in Biden's direction. And actually, I think the Democrats were hopeful that they'd be able to beat Trump on the day. So they've had a history this cycle of in special elections and in midterms overperforming their polls, because they're sort of people rallied. They think one of the biggest questions for 2024 is whether they'll be able to pull that off again at a general, or whether a lot of those people might stay at home because of a lack of enthusiasm about Biden and his campaign, or might vote third party. The anxieties within the Democrat camp are that too many people might splinter off from Biden's 2020 coalition. And again, last night, I think, didn't make it any more likely that they would come back.
Do Americans, so just going back to Donald Trump for a second, I mean, do Americans not care in the same way that I imagine that they might here in the United Kingdom about his sexual misconduct or allegations thereof, about the court cases, the litany of court cases that he is facing, and indeed, the charges on which he has been adjudged to have been guilty?
This is an unusual election because all Americans are already so familiar with both candidates, and I don't think it means they're happy about it. But there is a difference there, and I think increasingly when we talk about Biden's age and Biden's performance, I think it comes down to this. Even if people don't like Trump, I think a lot of Americans think he is potentially more able to get things done. And for this sort of group of voters that have not yet decided how they're going to vote, are not pleased about either options, it may well be that that's what sways them in the end. So just to sort of give you an idea of this, when we ask people to sum up both of the candidates in a word, and you sort of get those word clouds, the biggest word for Joe Biden is old. The biggest word for Donald Trump is criminal. And I think at this point, that's the choice between an old man and a convicted criminal. But I think a lot of the time, people thinking, well, maybe the criminal is more able to get things done.
There is huge panic amongst those Democrats that I've messaged this morning about the performance of their man. We are a country mile from the election. We're not that far away from the Democratic convention. Would another Democrat stand a better chance of beating Donald Trump?
The problem they're going to have is there is no obvious successor. So they have the Vice President Kamala Harris, and potentially initially maybe the plan was that it would be quite a smooth succession to Kamala Harris should the need occur. But she is sort of she is incredibly unpopular. We found her, when we polled this, to be the most unpopular vice president in recent history. So then you have to look around for something else. And actually, this is what we found from focus groups where we've talked to Democrats about this. And they'll sort of say they really, really like Joe Biden, but they do think he's too old, and they do like him a lot. It's quite interesting, actually, as a Brit listening to this, because people talk about the politicians they do like in terms that I don't think anyone does in the UK about the politicians they might vote for. But putting that aside, and we were asking them, we're exploring these ideas of, who else could it be? Who else might you like? And it was so striking just how little awareness there was of any of these other figures. Now, you might say that could be a good thing, but it's all being left incredibly late and risks looking incredibly chaotic too.
Certainly is. Scarlett, Many thanks again for joining us on the podcast. Always appreciate it. Back to Atlanta in just a moment to discuss what next for the Biden campaign. Welcome back. As the dust settles on the Biden-Trump debate last night, it will be Democrats who feel a gnawing unease with months of campaigning yet to come. So let's head back to Atlanta and Sky's James Matthews. James, look, there is another debate on the horizon. Will the Democrats actually go for it after last night? And if so, will it be Joe Biden at the lectern? Because already I am seeing people talking very seriously about replacing their candidate. And, of course, the Democratic National Convention is fast approaching in August.
The jury has to be out. I think the good money right now, Neil, would still be on Joe Biden. It would be for Joe Biden himself to take a step back. But bear in mind that Joe Biden is a proud man, a stubborn man, driven by ego like many politicians of his ilk. And it would take some shifting to convince him that he is not the man to lead the Democratic Party. It would probably take people close to him that he trusts, his wife, chief among them. But as long as he thinks he is the man, bear in mind, he continually states, I'm the man to beat Donald Trump, that's why I'm running again. It would take quite something for him to pull out of the race. The difficulty for the Democratic Party would be that if he's replaced, who do you replace him with? And would they have enough time to generate the kind of traction they would need to match Donald Trump? Kamala Harris, Vice President, she would be the natural choice based on her position. But bear in mind that she doesn't enjoy good approval ratings at all. If it was going to be somebody else, then you offend several constituencies by ditching Kamala Harris, the black vote, the female vote. So all sorts of issues to contend with should Joe Biden take the fall. But, you know, if he does take the fall on his terms, fine. They move on, a party united and do their best come November. If he resists entreaties to get rid of him, then it could get messy. They could go to the convention in August and he could face, you know, a hostile effort to unseat him. And that will be in August, a couple of months before the election. You know, that has to be a bad case scenario, certainly for the Democrats, in terms of taking on Trump. Bearing in mind that Trump's ahead in the polls, he's ahead in the key states. They would have considerable ground to make up. They couldn't guarantee that they could do it without Biden. And right now, they can't guarantee they can do it with him.
James Matthews and team in Atlanta, Georgia. Thanks very much indeed. And that's your lot for this edition of The Daily. We'll see you again next week.